I've always loved this time of year as Lent approaches, because I've always considered it a sort of new year in the spiritual life. When we have a new year in the regular monthly calendar, normally people set out to do resolutions that govern usually health. Maybe they do some financial thing where they're going to spend less money that year. But normally it's usually something that's going to make them a better person physically or financially or something materially. But Lent has that sort of same effect. Unfortunately, most of our New Year's resolutions on January 1st, anybody keep their New Year's resolutions? Does anybody even bother doing them anymore? Probably not. I stopped. But resolutions in the spiritual life are much more important. Why? Because although material realities and the health of our bodies and financial situation may provide us with a certain degree of happiness, they can never actually complete that missing dimension of the human heart that's meant for eternity. When our day school students in the school here have Mass, I often ask them the question about the purpose of things. I'll say simply, and you can answer too, what is a chair for? Sitting, right? You could use it for changing a light bulb, but you're changing a light bulb using a chair, that's for sitting. What is a candle for? Could be light, could be heat, to see your way in the dark. It could be a way of creating a solemn occasion like we do at Mass and the way we use them. What is a songbook for? Some of you are like, I don't know. You could use those if you wanted. Many of you do. But a songbook is for singing. It's for putting music in. And maybe because ours they have readings and it's for following along with the readings. Everything that's created either by God or man has a purpose. Right? You can ask yourself that question about anything. But I have a question for you, and this is usually what stumps most people. What are you created for? What are you created for? Nothing? Rick Warren, a pastor at a Protestant church, Saddleback Church in California, wrote a book once called The Purpose-Driven Life. Who's heard of that? Purpose-Driven Life sold millions and millions of copies. When I heard how many copies it sold, I looked and I thought, doesn't anybody know? And they realized that there was a major vacuum in our culture for understanding why you were created. That's this simple, and my mother would often remind her children of this. You were created by God, for God. You were created by God, for God. Your parents had a biological necessity in that, I get that. St. John tells us in his first letter that God is love, and therefore if you are created by God and for God, it means that you were created by love and for love. If God is love and love is God. Lent is for something. It's for recovering the deepest yearning of our heart, and that is to fulfill our purpose of being with God, who is love. And Lent reminds us, because it places squarely before our eyes the question, do we love? Do we want to be with eternal love? Where's the indifference in our life to that love? Several decades ago, there was a group of young boys, young teenagers, almost preteens, and they were outside of a church. And they were just playing, and they noticed that the priest inside, an elderly priest, was hearing confessions. And they began to push each other around and joking and daring each other to go in there and confess their sins. Finally, one of the boys, one of the braver ones among them, decided that he was going to do just that. And so he set off, full of pride, walked into the confessional and said, "Oh, Father, I guess I want to confess my sins," giggling the whole time. The wise old priest, of course, knew that something was up. And when he realized the young boy was just making sport of the sacrament, he played along for a while until at the end he said, "I want you to do a penance for me." And the boy said, "Yes." "You promise to do it?" He said, "Yes." "I want you to go out of the confessional and I want you to walk down the aisle of the church. And I want you to go to the end of the hall. There's a door there. I want you to open the door, and on the far wall there's a crucifix. And I want you to repeat this 10 times. And so he stepped out of the confessional. He walked down the hall of the church, the aisle, and he walked into the hall, opened the door where the sacristy was, and he turned and he saw the crucifix. And then he began to say and tried to repeat 10 times what the priest told him to say for his penance. He looked at the cross as he was instructed to do, and he said what the priest told him to say, and began by saying, "Jesus, I know what you did for me, and I don't care. Jesus," for a second time, "I know what you did for me, and I don't care." For the third time, "Jesus, I know what you did for me, but I don't care." "Jesus, I know what you did for me." And after the fourth time, he couldn't finish. He left that church and walked past his friends and went home and began to cry. He would eventually enter seminary, be ordained a priest, become a bishop, and eventually was given the honorary title of cardinal. He would relay this story of a young boy outside that church to a group on the day of his consecration as a bishop. And it wasn't until the end that he told his congregation that that little boy, in fact, was him. Friends, what is Lent for? Lent is for what you're for. Lent is to break our indifference to the love of God sacrificed on the cross. Lent is to break our hard-heartedness to the love and His grace that tries to transform our hearts every moment of our lives, trying to speak to that depth of our heart that no thing in this world can satisfy, because we were not made for anything in this world. And so, friends, today, the church once again gives us this opportunity of Lent to fight against those three things by proposing three contraries. The three contraries are prayer, almsgiving. The third one just left. Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Why? Because they compete against the three things competing for our attention: the world, the flesh, and the devil. The world would say you belong here. Prayer says you belong somewhere else. The flesh says give in to every temptation and every whim that passes your fancy. Fasting says no. I don't have to do everything that my will proposes to me, because not everything my will proposes is good for me, and we know it. And the last one, almsgiving. It's contrary, the devil. If you don't believe in evil or you don't believe in the devil, I would ask you to please reconsider, considering what's not only going on in our world, but our very own country. And we ask the question, will you fight with the Lord? The reason He's on the cross is because people did not want Him a part of their lives. We don't need to put Him there too. Almsgiving. Why? Because giving alms gives you joy. The Lord loves a cheerful giver. Or as my friends on the south side of Chicago would say, the Lord loves a cheerful giver. Joy destroys the power of evil. So for Lent, as we go through those things of fasting, almsgiving, and prayer. Keep a joy about you. That's what Jesus is saying in our gospel, right? Don't blow your trumpet. Don't look sad. I always look sad, so that way when Lent comes, you can't tell the difference of whether I'm fasting or not. So just so you know, that's why I do it the rest of the year. And friends, stare your inordinate desires right down with the Lord. Know that He loves you. He's come to redeem you and return that love. And that's how we overcome indifference. So let's be able to say, indeed, with the Lord, that we do care, in fact, what He's done for us, and prove that by how we live our lives this Lent.